Colorado is returning to the Big 12, but it's a very different Big 12. Who's going to be the rival? Who's going to be their team with all the beef? We're going to talk about that on today's episode of Locked On Buffs.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I am your host, Kevin Borber. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. We are also brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day for free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And who doesn't love free things? And if you need a second listen of the day, because I know I'm your first listen, go check out Locked On Texas Tech, hosted by yours truly over here, Chris Level. Chris, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, man. Looking forward to talking some ball with you, and welcome back to the league, I should say.
It feels like we're new rivals, but in a way, formerly acquainted, I guess. Like Colorado was in the Big 12 for a hot minute, then they left in 2011 for the Pac-12 for what they thought were greener pastures, but just turned out to be a little bit of a bigger paycheck and a decade of struggles for Colorado. So I think return to the Big 12 is a good move for them. What do you think, or how do you think Colorado fits into this new-ish Big 12, right? They never really had a rival in the Pac-12, never really seemed like they got settled in the Pac-12. So do they have a rival in the Big 12, or can they form one?
I'm sure that there's a lot of that Big 8 familiarity. The Iowa States, the Kansas schools, Oklahoma State, just a lot of those Big 8 schools that I'm sure it'll be fun. And proximity is there. That's what I think that it was exciting for the Hateful Eight or whatever, the schools that were phrased, that were left in the Big 12 conference, minus the TCUs and some of those that had been in the Big 12 for the longest. They were thrilled about the Colorado and the Arizona schools and the Utah additions from the standpoint of some of this conference realignment stuff. You look at a map and it just, the travel doesn't make any sense. There's no regionality to it. I mean, Texas Tech was in a conference back in the 50s and 60s with the Arizona schools, I think. The border conference. So, I mean, there's some familiarity here. And I will just tell you from the Lubbock standpoint and the fan base's standpoint, folks around here were thrilled when you could kind of get the sense that Colorado was really pushing the button and very interested to want to get back and be able to recruit the state of Texas. I mean, all that comes with being in the Big 12 when we weren't sure what the Pac-12's future was. And then it led to some dominoes falling, and this is just the way it's fallen. But that would be the way I would phrase that. I mean, I've been to Boulder. I do sidelines for the radio broadcast for Texas Tech, and I've been to Boulder a couple times back in the mid 2000s. And I remember sitting on a bus after a game because Mike Leach was in the locker room, very frustrated about the way his team had played in Boulder on a particular Saturday afternoon, and he was contemplating life and Pirates and all the things that Mike was crazy for. We're just sitting there like, what's going on? So I sat there right next to the stadium and just kind of took in the sights and sounds and scenes, and was just kind of reading social media before we would get on and drive to the airport. But Boulder's great, man, and I'm glad that I hope that the fans there have embraced this. This was a soft place to land when you weren't sure where things were going to go, but they automatically come in, and I do think have a lot of familiarity with people. And it's not necessarily with the Texas Techs per se, even though that they were in league together before, but it's a lot of that Big 8 familiarity. And I think that makes a lot of sense. It's the same with the Red Raiders and playing Baylor and TCU and even Houston and some of that regionality. That's what makes this stuff fun. And I hate it as much as anybody that Texas and Oklahoma aren't a part of it, that A&M is not a part of it, that Nebraska is not a part of it. And all those things, that's just when life seemed a lot simpler than it is now.
Yeah, you're telling me you're not a fan of Los Angeles to New Jersey, that conference matchup? You're not the biggest fan?
I mean, it just all makes perfect sense, right? I mean, and like I get the football part. Football is what this is all about and all that. But I mean, where it's really crazy is when you start talking, because I do the basketball color for our radio broadcast too. And I'm thinking like some of these Tuesday night basketball games that you're playing in some of these, I mean, that's just, it's lunacy. It's not my problem. I think, you know, I mean, I've already gone to Salt Lake City and I've been to Orlando, and that's and Morgantown is a bit out there too. But those are 3 hour max. That's like the longest road trip you make, at least from Lubbock anyway. And so, and Colorado is very centrally located as well compared to where all the schools are. But yeah, it's just like some of the travel. I mean, weren't really thinking about the old student athlete and some of this stuff, but you know, that's whatever's best for football and for TV, right?
That's what they say, Chris. That's what they say. Whatever's best for football on TV. That's what I keep hearing.
They can get you in trouble too. They have been a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about, which also it is worth noting that I don't know if anyone has it worse for traveling than I think it's UCLA. I think they have to go like 30,000 miles this year because they go to Hawaii, then to LSU, then they have their full-on Big Ten schedule, which is an adventure in of itself. So a lot of fun road trips for them planned. But let's get back to Colorado here. So one of the things I talk about a lot with Colorado, and I experienced this as someone who grew up on the West Coast, where I remember Colorado more as a Pac-12 team than I do as a Big 12 team, just simply because of my age. Not to make everyone else feel old, but I'm only 24, so I don't have like a very large memory of them being in the Big 12. I remember the back end of it, but when they made the move to the Pac-12, I was around 12. And so I just remember Colorado sort of being that odd team out, right? Where Oregon had Oregon State. They had Washington. Washington had Oregon and Washington State. USC had UCLA. Stanford had Cal. Everyone had a rivalry except for Colorado, it felt like. So when they get to the Big 12, and I do think that Deion plays a factor, and I think this is something that I'm going to ask you right here real quick. Do you think more teams will sort of have a rivalrous relationship with Colorado because of this attention and newly found buzz that they have?
I mean, college football at the end of the day is entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up a Cowboy fan, and so when Deion in the free agent deal and he played for Dallas, I mean, I've got his autographed picture in an office in my wall, along with Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, and Troy Aikman. I mean, that's
a good collection right there.
You darn right it was. It was a heyday of the Cowboys back when, a long time ago, when they were really good. It's been a minute, but he is entertaining. He's polarizing, and I think people have, and you I'm sure you deal with this on a daily basis. People love to love him, they love to hate him. There's not really anything in between. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
To me, though, I look at it from it's great for the league. It's entertainment. He's never dull. I'm fortunate enough to be around a head coach that's also somebody that is just never boring to be around. And Joey McGuire, they call him Joey Juice. I mean, he's just always positive and energetic and always got something to say and very talkative and transparent. And ironically, they're two guys that know each other very, very well. I mean, Joey coached one of Deion's sons at Cedar Hill High School back in the Metroplex. And so there's a relationship there. And I think more importantly, a mutual respect. I think depending on how the season goes or what is said or whatever, that will lead to some animosity or some whatever it may be from different programs. I think everybody's trying to find their way here because it's funny you mentioned that about Colorado and kind of curiosity about who the rival may or may not be. You know, Texas Tech fans probably hate A&M and Texas more than anybody else, and yet now you're not going to get a bite at that apple anymore. You know, maybe in some other sports, and so okay, now where do we direct our sports hate? And I think Baylor and TCU come close, Oklahoma State maybe, but you know, Colorado, there's not a natural. I mean, Colorado State, there's a rivalry there because in-state and all that stuff. I get it, but that's kind of big brother, little brother. I think. Kind of conversation, but as far as in conference, I think that's kind of fascinating to see kind of how this thing looks. I think Utah hadn't made many friends, but I mean, it's not like people around Lubbock, Texas, or in Boulder per se are walking around going, "I hate the Utes. Kyle Whittingham's a terrible person." No, he's a good coach. Their fans have just said some things that are interesting. I mean, Central Florida, I think, was an interesting one because they had a ton of success prior to coming into the Big 12, and then it was I don't want to say humbling, but it was like, man, this is not what you were used to. I mean, it's a grind, and I think their fan base was really loud and boisterous coming into last year, and then it was like, oh, okay, so they just barely made it to a bowl game and all those things. But I don't know anything about Central Florida. I mean, I know more now. I know the bounce house, and I know Gus Malzahn and that Florida speed and all those things, but. I think there's some possibilities here, but the problem is it takes time. You have to have results, controversy, things have to be said. And so we're kind of trying to answer these questions before a lot of this is played out. And then, Kevin, the main thing for like Colorado is how long if Deion's there long term, there's a lot of things that have a chance to marinate, I think, for sure, and all that. But if he's only there for another year or three, and then it's that's where, because you mentioned Deion is kind of what everybody knows him for, and after Shador is gone and Travis Hunter is gone and all that, like what does that look like? So anyway, I think that hard to answer those questions, but there's a lot of possibilities there. How about that?
Well, certainly a lot of possibilities, because I think, to add on this before we move on, there's so much energy around Colorado from their fans. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a fan base go from like virtually like dead silent on social media to like, if you say anything about Deion Sanders now, like you're going to have hundreds of accounts coming after you within seconds. Like, people, they'll ride or die for him. And I think it's kind of cool to see a non-traditional like program where it's not like Texas. It's not like Alabama or Ohio State, where they have long sustained success, or at least some of the programs have. Texas fell off for quite a bit, but you know what I mean, where their fan bases are so passionate. And I feel like it's kind of cool to have a non-traditional program sort of be in the mix of like popularity, because it's almost like we get so used to certain programs being sort of the face of college football. And I would say right now, Colorado is kind of a face of college football. I wouldn't say the face, but they're definitely one of the bigger stories in college football. And so it's kind of cool to see what their potential is.
They're a needle mover right now. And obviously you have to have results to continue to move that needle. Otherwise you just become a novelty, hey, they're that's a fun toy to play with, but there's no staying power. I mean, and obviously everybody there knows that. And Deion knows that, but it's funny because you're talking to a guy, you're talking about Colorado, but you're talking to a guy, I think I have in my office also, I have Darian Hagan's autograph.
Wow.
I was at the Davy O'Brien. I grew up in Fort Worth, and the Davy O'Brien Award is based in Fort Worth, and they have the ceremony. And I remember, Cordell to Westbrook up in Michigan, Cordell Stewart, and I mean, yeah. So I have lots of positive memories about the Buffs when they were rolling. Bill McCartney and that whole era. And then obviously Joel Klatt, and now he's a national talking head as far as college football goes. And Chris Fowler always mentions the Buffs, even when they weren't very good. He'd always get the Buffs in the news. But yeah, I mean, that's I think that they are, Colorado right now is good for the Big 12, because the Big 12 will largely, as deep as it is and as competitive as it is, what we're all going to fight for here, and really it's a league problem, is relevancy nationally. Like, why should people care? Right. Why do people need to tune into these games and care? Because that's what's going to move the needle and create more dollars and allow for this thing to sustain itself in years to come, which is Brett Yormark has kind of already said. Basketball, we're good. Football, we needed some success in the non-conference. We need some success in the playoffs and all that. But I think right now, before this season gets going, there's no doubt that Colorado is great for the Big 12. And not every program, you can say that. Not every program, is necessarily great for the league. They just happen to be a member, and because, again, I think it adds relevancy nationally.
Okay, you talked about the depth of the conference, and we're going to elaborate
Mm-hmm.
about that more when we come back. But first, a word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by our sponsors over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Okay, Chris, you talked about the depth of the Big 12. Give me like a crash course for those who are unfamiliar with the Big 12, because obviously I would say a lot of the Colorado fans are sort of new to, I would say, the Big 12, more so than Utah fans would be, because like Utah fans have been around, they've been around the block, they're used to switching conferences. Utah they joined the Pac-12 with Colorado in 2011. They joined it from the Mountain West. So they're used to sort of new adventures. Colorado, this is a return to the Big 12. Talk to me about what they should know, the depth of the conference, and everything in between.
Well, I think obviously minus Texas and Oklahoma, there's not, the quote unquote blue blood program. Okay. And we can argue about that term or what that means or signifies, but the TV folks have almost identified those programs and the brands that they want. But what we have here, and what I don't want to say what we're left with, because that sounds demeaning, because it's not. I mean, I think it's a great collection of programs and proximity in your favor. But this league is tough now. I mean, it's again, and I think we get caught up into listening to national folks talk about it because it's not the top end of the Big Ten or what the SEC has, and you get caught up into thinking, but there's not really many gimmies here, man. I mean, as far as the league, this was Oklahoma's league. They were the dominant force in here for all of the noise that Texas has made and all that. Oklahoma won this league a million times. It felt like it was they were the standard.
Right. The
last several years, though, I think there was a stretch there where there were two different teams playing in the conference championship game for the last 3 or 4 years in a row. That includes Iowa State. That includes Oklahoma State. That includes Texas. And Oklahoma was obviously factored in there somewhere. Baylor, Kansas State. I mean, so that speaks to, how much depth there is. And I would tell you, like, going into this year, I don't know if even Texas Tech or Colorado are in they're probably in a second tier conversation. And I don't know where you cut off the first tier, but they're, what I would say middle of the pack. What was Colorado picked in the media poll? I think Tech was picked like 8th or 9th. Where was Colorado at?
Was 11th.
Okay, 11th. Okay, so but there's, most people have said Kansas State and Utah. Okay, unlikely to turn out that way because the media never gets this right, and because sports, guys get hurt, teams aren't as good as you think, and that's the beauty of it. That's why we all watch. You can make great cases for the following. Arizona won 10 games last year. West Virginia was a handful last year. They bring a ton back. Iowa State really got it figured out toward the tail end. They bring like 85% of their production back from last year, including a quarterback and all their skill. And Matt Campbell, he's been very good. And I think Kansas, I'm a little leery on that, but a lot of people like them because Lance Leipold, that program was awful. Your fan base will be somewhat familiar with that just because the proximity of the states and all that. Kansas was just so bad, and yet now they're not. They are. You got to go beat them. Lance Leipold has done a phenomenal job, and if their quarterback stays healthy, which has been their problem, they are going to be a contender. I think you have teams like UCF, and I haven't even mentioned Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State is probably, I would say, I think Mike Gundy's program, I think we're 18 years in a row. And this stat is astounding to me. 18 years in a row, they've gone to a bowl game. I think 18 years in a row, they've also won 7 or more games. And I want to say of those 18 years, there's a handful of 9 and 10 win seasons. Like, it's not a small number either. I don't want to say it's half, but maybe a third of those have been 9 or 10 win seasons. Right. So, and how many teams have we talked about here? And then I think you had like UCF and Gus Malzahn. I saw that up close last year. A lot of speed, a lot of guys that ended up getting drafted. They loaded up in the portal. They have the benefit of being like Tech is in the state of Texas with the portal. It's like guys go off, and I want to come home. I want to be back in my home state. Well, UCF is taking advantage of their Florida location because guys leave Florida and they go off here and there and they want to come back. But so you're at, I don't know, what is that, 6 to 8, 9 teams right there, programs, and I don't think that you would have a hard sell on any of those 7 to 9 or whatever it is if they made it to the Big 12 championship game and played for the title. And, that's just the reality of it. So that makes for interesting conversations in the summer trying to figure out what in the heck is going to happen. And also the negative is there. It's also going to be difficult to get a second team into the playoff because everybody's going to beat up on everybody.
Right.
And
unless they have 2 teams that kind of
separate. Yeah, that's right. Kind of like what the Big Ten has done for years. Because, come on. The Big Ten, Maryland and Indiana and Purdue, some of this junk that they try to tell you is great. There just happens to be a lot of people that live there. But it's Ohio State, it's Michigan, it's occasionally Penn State. Yeah, right. Wisconsin, maybe Iowa, but it's just, it falls off. And so, I get why they wanted to add the Oregons and the USCs and all that stuff, but there's a lot of bad in the Big Ten. And there's, to be quite frank, some of that's in the SEC. I would say that if you try to pick your worst teams in the Big 12 this year on paper, Houston is kind of a rebuild. Cincinnati is in a rebuild. But the fascinating thing about those 2 programs, there's a reason why they were added to the Big 12 when the opportunity was there. Cincinnati was in the college football playoff when it was only 4 teams, 3 years ago when Luke Fickell was there. Houston is one of those jobs. Houston's kind of like Boise State. It's like it doesn't matter who coaches there. They just win. They always win. They're always relevant. Art Browse was there. Dana Holgerson was there. Kevin Sumlin was there. They just always win. Maybe not enough.
He was supposed to be the next guy.
There you go. That's exactly right. So, and if those are some of your worst programs, I just feel like you're on pretty solid ground. And Baylor is being picked to do poorly. Baylor won the Big 12 2 years ago, I guess it was. And so Dave Aranda has this, he wins the Big 12. Well, that was Matt Rule's players. Last year, they kind of fall off dramatically. And there may be another year in there, but still, he's got a bad year. He's got a Big 12 championship. It's like, okay, Dave, which one are you? Well, the real Dave Aranda Baylor football program, please stand up. So, but and they beat they won their, I think, the Sugar Bowl that year. So these are teams that were playing on a huge stage and winning championships, but so that just speaks to the depth of the league.
Yeah, the Big 12 has a lot of depth in it. Mm-hmm. It reminds me a lot of the Pac-12, where I think the Pac-12 got a bad rep for always beating up on itself because it was so deep, where it would have like 7 to 8 good teams and they'd all play each other. And then they would play each other again in the Pac-12 championship. And it's like, okay, Oregon has lost to Utah twice this season. And so it's like they're eliminated from playoff contention, right? Or USC has lost to Oregon and Washington or whatever it may be. And so I feel like it's going to be very similar to that. I do think, at least in the Big 12, Colorado has a chance to sort of not be in someone's shadow. In the Pac-12, it always felt like, okay, it's going to be USC, Oregon, or Washington. Or it's going to be Utah, USC, Oregon. It never felt like, okay, it's going to be someone outside of the Big 3. Whereas the Big 12, I think if you surveyed 100 people about who's going to win the Big 12 this year, you would probably get 60 different answers. Like, you'd be like, I think Utah, or I think Kansas State, I think Arizona. They kept a lot of talent. So I think the Big 12 has a lot to offer from a talent perspective, has a lot to offer from a depth perspective. And then, like you said, the only thing that could be hurting them is how deep they are, because obviously when it comes down to the end of the year, they don't care about depth. They don't care about competition. They care about which teams were able to run the table, right?
And this is why I'm a bit uncomfortable with the decision that they made. I understood why they did it, but you've got Utah and Baylor playing a non-conference game. You've got Kansas State playing Arizona in a non-conference game. These games were already scheduled. They kept them. Yeah. But when you're looking at this from a big picture standpoint, and Kansas State and Arizona, okay, these are two teams that have been talked about as potential league contenders. Well, you're guaranteeing one of your potential league contenders is going to have a loss in that game, and it's a self-inflicted wound.
Yeah,
by
where you go, hey, the Citadel, who are you playing this week?
So
Waco or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. So I get it, but I just and it may be difficult for a couple of teams to really, elevate, or have a clean of enough resume, because there's just not going to be much margin for error. That's just the way it's going to go. It's not going to be fair. It's just the way it's going to go. There's going to be a 1-loss or a 2-loss Big 12 team gets left out of the playoff, and there could be a 3-loss SEC team that we all think is extremely average or whatever that makes it into the playoff. That's just, expect it. That's just what's going to happen. And so, that's why, everybody needs to, I think in these non-conference games, you need to be rooting for your Big 12 brethren to do well for the bigger picture. But I'm fascinated by this league this year, because I don't think it's going to be hard to follow it and really feel like you're an expert of it, because there's going to be so much going on each weekend. In all parts of the country,
where it's like it's week 9 or 10, and it's like, okay, we have 7 teams still in contention, and it's like, what do you mean? Yeah. There's only 3 weeks left in the season. It's like, well, if this team wins, this team loses, and then this team loses, they're in. But if
make sure you're not in charge of putting that spreadsheet together, because that'll be difficult. That flow chart spreadsheet, whatever. But that'll be fun, and the TV folks want this. They want relevancy for more teams later on, and you're going to get that. But you're right, it's going to be confusing, and ideally maybe you want some separation for a couple of these programs, because it's all about playoff access, which increases street cred and revenue and all those things.
Yeah, it's all about the playoff access. And Colorado and Texas Tech, they have a chance to derail some teams' playoff hopes, but they also have a chance to play against each other for the first time in quite a while late in November. So we're going to talk about that when we come back. This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by our sponsors over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer and fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app, dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Okay, Chris, it is way too early to do this, but that's why we love college football, because we're going to do it anyway. Colorado heads to Lubbock on Saturday, November 9th, and they will be taking on, obviously, Texas Tech for what will be a very tough month of November for Colorado. They have Texas Tech, Utah, at Kansas, and Oklahoma State to finish out the year. Very tough 4-week stretch to sort of conclude the season. Regardless of what you think Colorado's ceiling is, I think they're a bowl team. Some people think that they could contend for more. I don't know. I have to see them play. They have 50 new players again, so it's hard to tell what they can be. But either way, the final 4 weeks of the season will be dependent, will help decide their fate. Like, are they going to make a bowl game? Are they going to contend? So talk to me about what this matchup means to Texas Tech.
Yeah, when the schedule came out, I think, nobody knew, okay, what are your home games? Who are you not having to play? That's as fascinating about this league as anything is, we were so used to the round robin that you just knew, every other year, you kind of already knew the schedule years in advance, because it was just alternating. And it was just kind of, okay, well, who's on the non-conference, kind of thing. And now it's when this thing gets put together, it's like, okay, where do you not have to go? Who does not come in to see you, or who do you not going to see at all? But I think fans here were very excited about Colorado being on the home schedule, certainly. And I know Joey has even said, well, I'm glad – I hate that I have to play Deion, but I'm glad we get him home first. He's kind of joked about that. But a lot of mutual respect there. I would say that this is, between Baylor, West Virginia, because of how good they were last year, and that's going to be on Thanksgiving weekend, and Colorado, those are three of the top, home games for Texas Tech this year. And they've got a couple of non-conference games. I think also Arizona State and Cincinnati come here. But nobody around here is going to get excited, just to be honest with you, about Cincinnati, Arizona State. Bottom line is, not very familiar with them. Don't know why I should be excited. That's what we're talking about, the relevancy part of things. So, yeah, I mean, I think it has a chance in a 7 home game schedule. Colorado may, in fact, be one of, if not the most look forward to home game, just because of Deion and Shedeur Sanders and all those things. So I think that I'm like you. I don't really know what to expect from Colorado, but if I'm being honest, I'm not exactly sure what to expect from the Red Raiders either. I like a lot of the pieces. There wasn't, a whole bunch of new guys brought in here, but there was 15 to 20. And they've had a hard time here keeping their quarterback healthy in the last decade. So, even when Mahomes was here, he kind of played dinged up. So I think that has a chance to be a very meaningful game, which we would both hope. And, does it affect the conference championship race? Does it the winner stay in it and the loser eliminated? I don't know, but that has a chance to be a very meaningful game in early November. And the weather here could be anything from 70 degrees to 10 or 15 degrees. I had no idea. Probably going to be closer to like 50 or 40 or something. But, you're no telling what you'll get in Lubbock, Texas in November.
Will we have tortillas being thrown?
Absolutely. At kickoff, they've always done it. That is a staple, a tradition. It's argued on kind of how that started. I think that the most common story is that years ago, I think they were playing A&M. This was in the 90s. They're playing A&M, and one of the announcers like, it looks like a tortilla factory here in Lubbock or something. And so the next week, it's like everybody just started throwing them, embraced it. Now it's never left. They freeze them, they poke a hole in them to make them make them fly further.
Science.
That's right. They've almost gotten penalties for throwing too many, and the stadium has a crew that picks them all up off the field as soon as the masked rider comes out, and the guns go off from the Raider Red and all that stuff. So anyway, it's part of the pomp and circumstance of college football. We love it. You got Ralphie, we got tortillas. Hey, it's
all the same, I think every college should have a special sort of, or it does for the most part, has some special sort of tradition. And then if you ask most people to explain why they do it, there's probably not a good reason, but that's what makes it so special, because why the hell not,
Bullseye. So, it's entertainment. Yes,
right.
It's entertainment. Yes.
Right, exactly. Chris, you get it. So I appreciate you for hopping on with us today. Tell the people where they can find you, what you're working on, what you guys are doing over there on Locked On Texas Tech.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kevin. Yeah, I've been been part of the Locked On family for about 2 years now. Locked On Texas Tech, another radio guy that I've known for forever. Casey Cowan and I co-host it. We were in radio business for about 15 to 17 years, and both just were like, you know what? Let's do this podcast thing, open up our time to do some other things in life in general. But we talk Red Raiders 5 days a week, sometimes 6 and 7 shows a week, depending on the time of year. So fall camp just started here, I'm sure, like it did with you guys. So anyway, I'm ready for the season to get here. Guns up, all those things. Hopefully the Buff fans will make their way to Lubbock, and Darian Hagan for life, man. Yeah, he was a stud. He was a stud.
Go. Appreciate you for hopping on. I appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Buffs and making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow, and I will see you guys next week.